This is an Ice Guys Patreon exclusive.
Welcome to another Ice Guys team season preview video for the upcoming season. And it's Ian Cameron, it's Alex B. Smith, and we are talking Chicago Blackhawks. It's the one Alex, I'm sure, has been waiting and looking forward to for a little bit. And we have another big Blackhawks fan and the next best and biggest broadcasting prospect in our midst, without a doubt. Jarek Rubel joining us to help talk a little Chicago Blackhawks for the upcoming season. Jarek, good to have you with us to talk a little Hawks hockey.
Thank you, Ian. It's good to see you guys. Alex, hope you guys had a great summer. Thankful you guys welcomed me on here for a little episode here with the Hawks, and I look forward to looking for some improvement with this team from what me and Alex have been unfortunately watching for the last several years.
Yeah, I think so too, Jarek. And I think for Chicago, everyone's looking forward to it. And I think Luke Richardson is too, because I know he wanted this team to take a step this year from what we saw last year. And when we look back at last year with the Chicago Blackhawks, obviously, look, 52 points, not a good season. It goes without saying. And as far as the Western Conference is concerned and the NHL, only last year did the San Jose Sharks have fewer points. So you look at Chicago, obviously looking to improve on that. And even with the addition of the Phenom, the number one overall pick, Connor Bedard, who did have a good chunk of his season taken from him due to injury, of course, we do have to remember that goals and offense was very much hard to come by last year for the Chicago Blackhawks. When you look at them as far as goals per game, yeah, even less goals per game scored last year in the regular season than the San Jose Sharks, if you can believe it. Dead last at 2.17 goals per game last year for the Chicago Blackhawks. So obviously they need to improve on that. As far as offense goes, you could say the same thing as far as the defensive end of the ice as well. Chicago, fourth worst in the NHL as far as goals against per game last year at 3.52. But it was actually offensively, they were even worse than they were defensively last year. And of course, we know if anyone has been watching the Ice Guys and my friend Alex B. Smith for ages talking about his beloved Blackhawks, he knows he's never been fond of this team's power play. And last year, it goes without saying, another bottom of the barrel power play last year in the NHL for the bottom five in terms of power play percentage. So that's going to have to go up. Anything and everything offensively has to improve, bottom line. For the Chicago Blackhawks this year. The good news is there's pieces in place to maybe see some improvement as far as putting the puck in the net. It's not only Connor Bedard year two, should be more comfortable. It's going to be a second training camp, which should be something he's more up to speed now with what to expect. NHL game speed, right? When you're a kid that young, you're not used to it in year one. Well, now you've got it in the sense of it in 1 year, and you're going to be more ready for it in training camp and when the regular season hits. And if he stays healthy, which you'd like to hope he plays more games this year than he did last year, you got to believe just having Bedard out for closer to 82 games is going to make you better offensively just like that, at least a little bit. But what's also good to see with Chicago is you bring in a veteran like Tyler Bertuzzi who can do the dirty work, get to the open areas of the ice. Bedard can find them, and he can score those type of goals that they were not getting enough of last year in and around the crease area. They bring back an old Blackhawk, what's old is new again, in Teuvo Teravainen. Bringing him back into the fold as well. Taylor Hall returned to health for him. There's another thing that can greatly help this offense and enhance it. You hope Bedard stays healthy for close to 82. You get Hall back. You add Bertuzzi. You add Teuvo Teravainen. And there is reason to think this team is going to be maybe not just a little better offensively, but potentially a lot. I think the question is going to be still down the lineup. What are you still going to get from the bottom six? I mean, Jason Dickinson would have these little hot streaks here and there, short term. Donato's Pizza, he's going to be in a depth role. Can he step up and deliver? Lucas Reichel and Philip Kurashev, kind of enigmas, these two guys. You think the world and the potential that is there for them offensively, and you don't always see it. So those two are going to have to take a step. But even if with those questions, right? Hall being back, the Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi additions, Bedard hopefully playing closer to an 82-game season. All of those reasons alone, think you got to probably point the arrow up for improvement offensively, at least on paper here for Chicago. Blue line's still a work in progress, but what I will say this is the other Vlasic, it's a Vlasic, Alex Vlasic. I'm telling you what, he showed me something last year. There's definitely something to build around when it comes to Alex Vlasic on the blue line. Thought his play improved tenfold throughout the course of last year. Seth Jones is now one of the old veterans of the team. Connor Murphy, injuries is a galore, but he's been one of the longer tenured Chicago Blackhawks. Korchinski, I want to see him take a huge stride this year. They think a lot of his ability to be a cornerstone blue liner for Chicago. We'll see if he can take that step forward. I actually like the 2 veteran additions. Alec Martinez, a Stanley Cup winner with Vegas, I should say, and LA. That's something that a young team like this, a team trying to build, can always use that winning experience, that Stanley Cup and playoff experience, and especially on the blue line. And Alec Martinez delivers that. And believe it or not, for all the criticism and all the derision and all the anger Leafs fans felt toward this guy, I even don't mind Chicago bringing in TJ Brody. I really don't. He's going to play a depth role on this blue line. He gets out of the fucking hotbed and the friggin' pressure cooker that is Toronto, where if you don't play well, you hear about it, you can't get away from it. It really drives people mentally. They get mentally screwed up when they start struggling in a place like Toronto with the Leafs. He also had all kinds of issues off the ice, family issues, and there's some health issues as well going on. So I think a change of scenery is what he needed. And I actually think there's a chance that this change of scenery for TJ Brody flips the switch. And we're not asking him to be a dominant. We're not asking him to be Cale Makar. We're not asking him to be Miro Heiskanen, okay? We're just asking him to be sound, steady, play a little more physicality. I think he lost a little of that physicality later in his time with Toronto. Get back to that. Be sturdy. Make a strong first pass out of your zone. Just be confident. Because too many times, you pressure him, and teams knew this. You pressured TJ Brody in the offensive zone or in his defensive zone, he'd turn the puck over. And that was always an issue. I think the key is going to be reacting better to that, not panicking, be poised, make a good first play with the puck. If he can do that, and I think now the change of scenery will help for TJ Brody as well. In net, I loved the addition of Laurent Brossoit. What I did not love was, unfortunately, the fact he's going to be sidelined at least to begin the season. Very unfortunate setback for Laurent Brossoit there, but I still love that addition. This is a guy that has posted terrific numbers in a very expanded backup role. Like, he got a lot of starts in Vegas 2 years ago. Remember, he is the goalie in the Stanley Cup playoffs for the Vegas Golden Knights, and he was playing great in those playoffs too before he got injured. And Aiden Hill takes over, and the rest is history. They win the Stanley Cup. But let's not forget, before Aiden Hill took over and Brossoit was in net, Brossoit was playing well. And then last year with Winnipeg, back with the Jets backing up Hellebuck, great. Second half of the year, he was better than Hellebuck. His numbers were better than Hellebuck. He was more consistent than Connor Hellebuck. His numbers got better and better, and I think he's ready to challenge to be the guy, the number one goalie for this Chicago team, because I think he should be given that chance at the very least, because you're going to sell me on an old, broken down, older, aging Peter Mrazek? No. You're going to sell me on Arvid Soderblom, who's been nothing but a mess for the majority of his career with Chicago in net? No. So why not give Laurent Brossoit this opportunity to be the undisputed number one goaltender for Chicago? I know Mrazek's a veteran and he's still going to have a big say in it, but let's turn it to Brossoit. Let's give Brossoit the runway to see what he's got as the number one goalie, because I think he's earned it with the quality and improving level of play we've seen from him with Vegas 2 years ago and then with Winnipeg again last year. So very fascinating team to watch here. I think there'll be improvement. I think there'll be offensive improvement for sure. I think on the defensive end, certainly Brossoit being in, I give him a puncher's chance to have some decent defensive nights. Brossoit out, I think it goes out the window when you look at it. That's how important I think he is, because, again, with Mrazek, a aging guy, there's been injuries galore. Even last year, he couldn't get out of the season unscathed with injuries. And Soderblom, it goes without saying. And you'll hear from Jarek and Alex in just a moment. They don't think too highly of the Swede. Let's put it that way. Soderblom, not a big fan. And there's a certain nickname Alex has called him over the years, and I'll let Alex fill you in on what that is. But bottom line is, there's a big, to me personally, and Alex is the guy of our crew that keeps the great goalie depth rankings. There's a huge drop-off Brossoit to whoever it is. Not as big from Brossoit to Mrazek, but it's a gigantic drop from Brossoit to Soderblom. So that is definitely something you're going to watch. It's going to be one of these deals where Chicago's going to be competitive, chance to win games, better chance with Brossoit, score more goals, but it's going to be score more goals and maybe give up more when you don't have Brossoit in there, and it's one of the other two, an aging Mrazek and just an awful and just, not good enough Soderblom. And I don't know if I like the choice of either of those two Alex, we'll start with you. What do you think? Your beloved Blackhawks.
Well, it'll be a better year in 1901 West Madison. It won't be a playoff season, but I don't think we're sitting around waiting for the lottery. So that's improvement. We have some quality, additions to the front end. I love the signing of Bertuzzi. I think his game, his kind of gritty style, that net front presence, I think that's going to really complement Connor Bedard moving forward. Because that's the thing with Bedard, as great of a goal scorer as he is, he's just a natural playmaker. And I think we see that playmaking ability open up more when you have guys who create traffic in front, like a Tyler Bertuzzi. You got guys who are coming back, veterans like Taylor Hall, who they seem to have kind of a good rapport the few games they played with one another before Hall went down. I think Andreas Athanasiou comes back, only played 28 games last year. So you have additions that are, look like new additions, but they've been around for a whole season, a whole couple of seasons. I think that's really going to help him mature in his second year because, you always worry about the sophomore slump. Even if he has a little bit of a slump and a dip in his numbers, but he plays, the full, 82 games, he still has guys around him that can chip in on a given night and pick up the scoring where they don't have to rely on Connor Bedard to get a hat trick to win a game 3-2, 4-2. On the back end, things are still a bit shaky, but they're getting a bit better. Kevin Korchinski, I love the fact that he doesn't have to be up front with Seth Jones. He can play in that second role with Connor Murphy. Give him some time to develop and gel. Think about, years ago when we saw Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook. These guys were thrown right into the fire as number 1 and number 2 defensemen immediately. Having Korchinski have some time to learn with a veteran like Murphy and have guys in front of them, and he doesn't have to play those big time minutes just yet. That's a really good sign. I love that Vlasic's up front. He's really been the star of the show on the blue line as far as I'm concerned. Seth Jones, he give you a goal every now and then, give you some assists, and then he'll make some boneheaded plays. He'll take some dumb penalties. He cancels himself out more times than not. So, and for what we're paying him, that's just a bit unacceptable, but he's still serviceable. At the end of the day, this is a serviceable blue line. Adding Alec Martinez is fantastic. 37 years of age, still one of the best shot blockers in the game. He'll also give you some depth and some positioning to move come trade deadline time because he's obviously going to be one of the people that everybody's going to be looking for. You want to have a great shot blocker and a guy who's been there multiple times, won multiple cups down the stretch. And TJ Brody, he said change of scenery should help him. Hopefully he can find his game and play well. Like I said, no pressure, not being on the top roll. He's in that bottom six. And if he can't figure it out, he's in Chicago, head out the Magnificent Mile, get some nice suits, and then sit in the press box for about 50 or 60 games until he gets traded and moves somewhere. So it works out either way for him, works out well for the team. And then we get to the goaltending. I was absolutely thrilled on July 1st to find out we got Laurent Brossoit. I think he's one of the best backup goaltenders in the league, a guy who can play as a true number 2 backup if needed, but also can step in and fill in that 1A, 1B role. And as you mentioned, I was really hoping to see him play this preseason and that he could push Mrazek to that number 2 spot and that he would have gotten the opening night start against Utah. Unfortunately, he had the meniscus surgery. And he recovers. Hopefully, will recover from that. Something that I know all too well about because I've hurt my meniscus over the spring and summer. That is a very nagging injury, and when you're a goaltender, to have to push off to the sides, that's something that you really want to take your time with. You don't want to rush it because you could really screw it back up again in a hurry. So no need to rush him. Don't play him. Obviously, he's going to miss all camp. He's going to miss the first couple weeks, may even miss the first month. That's okay as long as he gets back in by November and we don't have to see too much of Arvid Soderblom, who is 7-34-4 in his career as a Hawk. So the only reason this guy's going to make the team opening night is because of an injury. He shouldn't even be in Rockford as far as I'm concerned. He should be in Indy or in Russia. But we're going to have to deal with him at least for a little bit. And we have Peter Mrazek, who had a fantastic season considering the fact this team had 0 offense and not much to do on the blue line. He put up some quality starts and some really good numbers and stayed relatively healthy for the majority of the year. So if he can stay healthy and eventually be that 1A, 1B tandem with Brossoit, get hot early, maybe then he cools off and then Brossoit can come in and kind of take the reins over, that would be a massive upgrade over what we saw the last 2 years as far as goaltending for the Hawks. So I'm happy as a Hawks fan. I think this is going to be a competitive team. There'll be times to bet on this team, and I think we'll know there's times to bet against this team. I think those all those spots will kind of come to light a little bit easier. So as a Hawks fan and a bettor, I'm thrilled and really excited about the season coming up.
There you go. A lot more to look forward to, a lot more entertaining brand of hockey, a lot more competitive team, probably more wins, probably more points. I didn't mention this in my preview, but over is on the lean list. I don't know if I pull the trigger, and I don't know if I get there. I want a little more clarity on Brossois' situation before I go ahead with that. But like I said, I'm leaning in that category with a little overlean with the point total for Chicago this year. I guess the key word, as Alex alluded to, massive upgrades. You have the potential for a massive upgrade offensively, massive upgrade in net with a healthy Brossois. Let's not forget to mention massive upgrade in the play-by-play microphone too this year on television for the Chicago Blackhawks as well. Going to our good friend Rick Ball, who will do an outstanding job. He's talking about a home run hire. He's talking about home run additions like Tyler Bertuzzi and Brossois with the players. Home run edition in the broadcast booth with Rick Ball coming on board. Jarek, speaking of broadcasters, our young aspiring broadcaster, Jarek Rubel, what do you think here for Chicago?
Well, like Alex said, no playoffs. I mean, that would be a real pipe dream. And if it happened, I mean, I'm not going to complain, right? But to me, I'm like kind of like marking them around where Seattle and Calgary finished last year, kind of around like 79, 81, 83 points, around that range, pending health, because you lose Bedard and Hall again or a goaltender. I mean, things will go sideways fast, but they have a lot more NHL caliber players on this team than they did last year. I mean, Martinez and Brody coming in on the back end are much better than Magna and Tenorti by, a country mile, even if they're over 35 years of age. Like you guys touched on, Martinez block shots, day in and day out. He's always amongst the league leaders in that. I can't hate that. The Brody signing to me was a tad like, why did we do this at first? But I start thinking about like Davidson's long-term like outlook of this team, and it seems like he wants to make Rockford a contender and let all those guys win together down there, and then let them come up and hopefully win in Chicago together. And Alex touching on Soderblom not being in Rockford, totally agree, because that, in my opinion, is a Calder Cup favorite kind of team, and you shouldn't want that guy in the blue paint if you have a chance to win. I don't care if it's a step lower, he's got to go elsewhere. Send them to Indy. I completely agree with that, Alex. On the top, in the forward core, though, I like what they did. It's very sneaky. And in terms of like betting, you would think overs probably early on while, the defense kind of settles in and, systems kind of get learned. But Bertuzzi and then you put Taylor Hall, in my opinion, with them. Those guys played together in Boston a couple years ago. And in that first round against Florida, they generated so many chances, at least early in that series, before it went sideways for Boston. But I looked at that and it didn't, sit with me first that they were that good in the first round. And you go back and watch the highlights. Those guys were odd man rushes going up and down the ice. They were pretty good defensively too. And I'm not one to look at Bertuzzi like a defensive player. But I think Davidson did his homework really well here in terms of this offseason and like his long-term outlook. Teravainen coming back's great. I think he found himself coming back home here. I don't think he ever really wanted to leave Chicago, but Stan Overpay and Bickle kind of forced that hand for him to get out of there. Kurashev, I have to be sold on overall as a player outside of Connor Bedard. But, I mean, he's still an NHL caliber player. Athanasiou is going to be back, so you put him. That's way more speed already in the lineup. Dickinson was out of the players on this roster, the only one that was plus out of the plus-minus ratings last year, which is very noticeable. That team was miserable from season start to season's end. I mean, they didn't win a road game for 2 months, it felt like. I think it was like 17-game losing streak. So there's going to be improvements everywhere for them. I mean, I would think Connor Bedard's a point-per-game player, especially if Taylor Hall's on his line. And if you have that, I mean, you're going to be able to sneak through some of these bottom feeder teams and just collect the points that you couldn't last year. So in that regard, I mean, in terms of the point total, I mean, I would say probably over unless Bedard gets hurt at 73.5. I see them flirting with 80. I can't really ever think about going under. In goal with Brossois and Mrazek. Mrazek's capable at home. So if he's able to play on home ice and you could kind of arrange your starts that way, I think that's how you're going to maximize Mrazek's value heading into the season. But, I mean, I got no complaints with Chicago knowing that they're not going to be a playoff team. Like Alex said, they're not going to be a lottery team. So I would say take the point total over, but don't expect them to be really good. It might not be the ugliest prettiest, over in the point total. But I'm confident that Luke Richardson's going to have these guys playing NHL hockey. And if not, then it's going to be a matter of maybe not the roster. Maybe it is Richardson because there's only so long you could go before you don't see, any sort of results out of the guys you have on the ice.
That's an excellent point, and that's something I was going to mention too. Luke Richardson has done a fantastic job with these youngsters so far, and weathering the storm of dealing with being a horrible hockey club and dealing with the losses. And you need a guy like that around. But if we look at just the history of the Hawks, they don't really hold on to coaches who don't really progress with the program well. So if things don't get rolling, especially on offense, it could be Luke Richardson's job sooner than later. And you got like I said, you're trying to keep things intact, especially down in Rockford. So you don't want to make too many radical moves. But
Right.
that's something to keep in line. It wouldn't shock me if this team, if they don't make it over the 73 point total, get to that 80 point, 85 point mark, and the defense hasn't, like I said, barring injury, of course, but the defense hasn't held up there in the bargain, and the offense doesn't come in more consistent. Luke Richardson could be gone, and the Hawks might be making a move. That's not going to be indicative of saying Luke Richardson's a bad coach. It's just that his time and his part of being a part of this project has run out. And I think it's to be completely honest and transparent, looking long term, I don't see him being here for the duration of this. If this team ends up being a playoff team in 3 years, a contending playoff team in 3 years, I don't think it's going to be Luke Richardson as a coach. I just don't. I think at some point he's going to outgrow this team, and his role is going to be served with another program, another club that's trying to rebuild. I think that might just be his niche as a coach. But I don't know if he's going to be the guy that really takes them to the promised land. So he'll put in the work. Obviously, the team has responded well to what he's done over the last couple of years, but he may not quite be the guy just yet. We'll find out this year, and if he makes an improvement just like this team does, then that'll really say something about what's going on. But I feel comfortable with the coaching staff. I feel great with Kyle. I give Kyle. We've given him an A, but I have to give him an A minus for this off season, only because of the fact that you could have gotten Yaroslav Askarov for dirt cheap, and you didn't. That's the only reason I give him A minus. Other than that, I think everything looks pretty good so far.
I love the long-term outlook. I know this is like a current season preview, but like the long-term outlook of this team and what they're doing in Rockford. I mean, it looks like, I'm looking at the roster I have, about 9 to 10 guys that will likely at least play in the Indian head sweater at some point down in Rockford. And those guys are all going to learn to play together and be together, and the culture is going to be good when they make it to the big show. So
listen, if it's a betting show, if you can find AHL Calder Cup futures and you see something with Rockford at a plus 1,500 or better price, I'd say take a swing at it. If Comesso can make a stand and take over the number one spot, which that should be easier said for him if it's just him and Soderblom, then like I said, all those guys that are future Hawks in the next 2 to 3 years that are playing in that top six right now, they're absolutely loaded. So the Rockford Ice Hogs, team to watch out for in the AHL this season.
do we have like a little future segment, or can I go ahead and fire off on
Well,
something?
we are, absolutely. I've got
Okay.
actually one in mind too, but you were talking about the AHL futures. I do see Rockford 12-15-1 in that range right now to win the Calder Cup next year. Of course, Hershey 5-1, Coachella Valley 6-1, the top two favorites. Of course, Hershey back-to-back Calder Cup champions. Milwaukee Admirals were in the conference finals last year. They're plus 800. Providence Bruins 10-1. Ontario Reign 10-1. Tucson Roadrunners meet 10-1. Cleveland Monsters 14-1. Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins 20. So that's what we're looking at.
Yeah, but yeah, your Central Division in the AHL, it's going to be a dogfight between Milwaukee and Rockford pretty much all season.
Yeah.
So,
all right, Jarek, futures for Chicago. What do you got?
All right, I got one legitimate one, and then I got one crazy one that's more of like reason behind it, and you could use it for like substance within the rest of the league. So I like Connor Bedard over 82.5 points. I perfectly expect him to be a point per game player.
So do I. That was one of mine, and I'm going a little safer though. FanDuel's got 80+ points at minus 125. I'm willing to lay the minus 125 for 80.
Yeah, that's in my price range too. If it's, for that, that's perfect.
Yeah,
I completely
like
agree with that. There's no reason if he's playing with Taylor Hall and Teravainen and Bertuzzi that he shouldn't be racking up these assists. There should be plenty of multi-point games. But the fun one, and I've talked to you and Alex both about this, the Blackhawks play in the Winter Classic this year. And before we get to that, they played in the Winter Classic couple years after they drafted Kane and Tays. And prior to that, Bill Wirtz had passed away. And then Kane and Tays come onto the scene. Kane wins the Calder. They go to the outdoor game and they make the conference final against Detroit. Detroit goes to the final. They played Detroit in that outdoor game. So that goes hand in hand. Then no 10 million players, like $10 million players, in my opinion, don't really lead to playoff success. The cap's going up, so that number will likely change a little bit. But you get into like the whole weird similarities. Rocky dies, Bedard wins the Calder, and now the Hawks and the Wings are playing outdoor games this year. And I've told you guys this before. Since 2008, only 3 seasons in the entire existence of like outdoor hockey in the NHL has the Stanley Cup final featured at least one team, or I should say no teams that didn't. So all the other years, there's been at least one team in the Cup final that played in an NHL outdoor game that year. And, you know, those are the similarities there with the Hawks and the Wings. So I'm just like, they matched up in the conference final in 2009. It's pretty stupid to think they'd match up in the Cup final in 2024. But if you want a real long shot, I mean, Kane versus Bedard, you could have some stupid, you know, little theory going into that. But it's just the similarities. I'm big on that. And it's just like the patterns are very weird in how they're lining up.
There we go. A little superstition in our handicapping and in our analysis right there.
Based on that connection, though, I mean, St. Louis to at least reach the Western Conference Final may not be crazy.
I'm just thinking Detroit, because they're likely, if they don't get off to a hot start, do they fire Lalonde? And dating back to 16-17, only 1 year, and that was with Tampa versus Colorado, no first-year head coaches. There's been an interim head coach or a first-year head coach in the final every year since 2016.
Wow, that's great. It's an interesting coincidence.
That's why there's so many just weird things that happen in the NHL. Like, are they realistically going to go on a deep playoff run?
And wait, just to go back to that, even to add to that, Drew Bannister, this would be his first full year, St. Louis.
Yep.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah, you're right.
I might actually look at a St. Louis to win the West Future, which would be something. It'd be a hedge position.
They just put Torrey Krug on season-ending IR, so that clears up that cap space.
A lot of cap space.
Yeah.
You might be on
it's weird how these things line up, because last year Edmonton played in the Heritage Classic, and then there goes Woodcroft, and then sure enough, they're basically the President's Trophy winners from American Thanksgiving on and go to the final.
Yeah.
Like I said, you bring up some interesting comparisons and interesting coincidences.
I was mad I didn't bet Edmonton last year, because I was on them for the final 2 years ago. And then both of those things come through in October, November last year, and the odds were crazy. And I just didn't.
Personally, I'm not ready to buy St. Louis winning the conference and cup. Never know. Crazy.
No.
Columbus
based
is
on
the
that
outdoor game.
Yeah.
Columbus is the head coach. Outdoor game, and maybe with for Johnny there's some momentum there. Who knows?
Yeah, it'll be interesting with the Chicago Blackhawks and whether this little coincidental theory here ends up coming to fruition.
I always like to bring that stuff up, because you could use it to more teams than just
a little sorcery in our handicapping.
Yeah.
We joke, but sometimes patterns do show themselves like this, especially in a sport like hockey. So
that's exactly right. There's no doubt. And the only thing I have to add is I agree with what Jarek said about Connor Bedard. 80 plus points minus 125. I think it's probably one of the better futures, player point futures this year in the NHL. 61 points in 68 games this year. I think he probably stays a little bit healthier, gets close to that 80. And look, it's like Pez dispensers now in the NHL with guys getting 90 points, 100 points. It's like out of style now. It's not as difficult as it used to be to get 85, 90. 100 points in an NHL season. That's just the nature of how scoring's gone up and just the abundance of talent and skill that we see now in the NHL and speed. I think
he's a couple years away from being a legitimate Art Ross candidate and like a maybe 50 goal kind of guy. I do think he has that in his game, and once he fills his frame out, has a better group around him, becomes the true leader and superstar that we know he can be. I think that'll be in due time, but I think, for now, we will see him chip in more with the assists than we will the goals. That's why at 35.5, I thought anywhere between 33.5 to 35.5 for goals. I would look under that. I think he's going to be more of a facilitator. He's going to open things up, and that would lead to maybe looking for some point totals over with Bertuzzi, with Hall. I think those are the guys that are going to be the biggest recipients from number 98 this year.
Yeah, I'm with you there. More goals from Bertuzzi, maybe, than look to bet Bertuzzi, maybe.
He might be a great bargain bin guy.
That'll be like I was
You
talking
know, I'm
to my
waiting
uncle.
for Bertuzzi
Yeah.
goal prop. You know it.
Strikes me if like Brandon
it.
Saad
Yeah.
with Taze on that top line. Saad would always be on
Yep.
that back door on the left wing, and it would just be tap in city all the time.
Well,
You know, Bedard's gonna
until
find
he forgot how to find the net. Because
Well, yeah,
Brandon
I mean-
saw the guy who once again could have scored 40, 50 goals. Yeah.
Plenty of wars.
Yeah.
Yeah, rough.
Great stuff. There it is. The Chicago Blackhawks with two of the biggest Blackhawks fans we know, Alex B. Smith and Jarek Rubel. I'm Ian Cameron. This has been the Chicago Blackhawks Ice Guys team season preview video. Keep checking back daily for more season preview team videos.